Brachot habaot, ladies. I am so happy that you ventured out after Rosh Hashanah, especially in this weather, in order to hear some Divrei Torah during Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, in order to boost your neshama all the more in preparation of the upcoming Yom HaNorah ve'ayom Yom HaKippurim. I also want to welcome all the viewers on Torah Anytime. I hope you all had a meaningful Rosh Hashanah and that you davened well. I truly hope that all your tefillot are going to be answered letovah ulivracha, and that we'll all experience a new year filled with mazal, with bracha and atzlacha. And I want to take the time to personally thank every single woman out there all over the world, all over this country, who's been reaching out to us with donations towards all the holiday packages, whether it's the Rosh Hashanah packages, the Sukkot packages, whether it's a general donation, and in general, just the outpouring of tzedakah. Some of you emailed me today asking if you could still donate towards the various causes, and the answer is absolutely. You know, these days are the days where we open our hearts and our pockets in order to help others who are less fortunate than us, so that those other ladies can go into the Chag with a good and happy feeling. And you can continue to make your donations through the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah and even throughout the entire Chag of Sukkot, because we're always trying to help other women less fortunate than us with whatever we can over the Chag, so that they can enter into the Chag feeling good, feeling happy. It's never too late to sponsor a holiday basket or just send in a donation to be used for a woman out there, for an almanah, for a divorced woman, an older single. A lot of times we help young kids. As a matter of fact, I encourage you to give of yourselves throughout this Chag, because in this way, you know that you helped another woman in Am Yisrael and even her children out there with everything that they needed in order to enter into the Chagim with grace and with dignity. I cannot express this more than I have already been expressing it, ladies. Please continue to make your donations. There's so many women out there that really, really need help. You can make your donations by logging on to www.ohelsara.com. Sarah is without an H. OHELSARA.com. Or you can call the office at 718-500-4550. Again, that number is 718-500-4550. And I really hope that those donations are going to keep coming in, because there's so much good work out there that really needs to be done. And throughout these days and throughout the Chagim, I will be continuing to appeal to you, because it's so important that we go into the Chag knowing that everybody was taken care of, at least the ones that we know about. That being said, we'll start now. We have a lot of work to do today. Ladies, we just spent 2 intense days davening before the Ribono Shel Olam and crowning him as the sovereign king of the entire world. Chachamim tell us that Rosh Hashanah is one of the most powerful of Chagim on the Jewish calendar. During these past 2 days that we spent in prayer, we recommitted ourselves to our relationship with Hashem. And throughout these next few days of Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, we're going to continue to build on that recommitment as we progress into Yom HaKippurim. But guess what? Just as we end with Rosh Hashanah, we're confronted with a fast day, Tzom Gedalyah. Anybody know who Gedalyah was? The Gemara of Rosh Hashanah informs us that we fast on the 3rd day of Tishrei, because on this day, Gedalyah ben Achikam was murdered. Gedalyah was a leader in Am Yisrael. And just like we fast on Tisha B'Av for the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, we fast on the yahrzeit of Gedalyah's death to teach us that the death of a tzaddik is equal to the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. Not only that, but when the tzaddik died, it marked the completion of the Churban. His death signified the last remnants of Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael, which was now extinguished with his death. I'm going to explain what I mean by that a little later on, but the question that I want to pose right now to you all, to you here and to the women watching on Torah Anytime, question is, why do we have to fast on the yahrzeit of a leader in Am Yisrael? And why this leader as opposed to anybody else? It almost seems very random. Like, why do we have to fast the day right after Rosh Hashanah? And why does Gedalyah ben Achikam, who we rarely speak about or know, merit to receive his own designated fast day? What's the meaningful lesson of this fast day and its significance? You have to know why you fasted. And if you didn't fast, for whatever the reason may be, maybe next year, we shouldn't have a next year, but just in case you happen to fast, again, on Tzom Gedalyah, you'll know why it is that you're fasting. So, the first thing we need to know is that Tzom Gedalyah isn't merely commemorating some tragedy that happened to us long ago. The story of Gedalyah ben Achikam's rise and his fall represents a major turning point in our history, and it carries such an important message that's relevant for all generations. The story of Gedalyah ben Achikam is actually told to us through Yirmiyah Hanavi alav shalom during the times of the destruction of the first Bet HaMikdash. So I'm going to start at the point in history where the Babylonians have already burned the Bet Mikdash down, and sadly the majority of Am Yisrael has either been killed or taken into exile. And only a few Jews remained in Eretz Yisrael. Those few Jews that were still living there lost everything. Think about the tragedy. The Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. The Jewish government fell apart. The Malchut went to pieces. Thousands of Kohanim and Levi'im were murdered, unfortunately. The situation was so grave that looking at our people from the outside in, it seemed as if all was lost. And at this point, Yirmiyah decides to return to Eretz Yisrael in order to live with those few survivors. Prior to that, by the way, Yirmiyah was being held captive together with the majority of Am Yisrael in Bavel. But what happened? Nebuzaradan, the Rav Tabachim, the chief butcher, and let me say that he was called the chief butcher not because he supplied meat and food to the people. That was his title. He was actually the head of the Babylonian military. So you could imagine what kind of person he was and how he commanded his battles if that was his title, the chief butcher. And this butcher sends Yirmiyah free. He sets him free. Nebuzaradan tells Yirmiyah, I'm allowing you to go back and join the remnants of the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. Veshuva el Gedalyah ben Achikam ben Shaphan, and return to Gedalyah, the son of Achikam, the son of Shaphan. Asher hifkid melech Bavel be'arei Yehuda. This Gedalyah is the one whom the king of Bavel, who is Nebuchadnezzar, has appointed over the land of Yehuda. Ladies, if you think about it, it's astonishing. The Babylonians practically wiped out all the Jews. And here, it looks like things just might be taking a turn for the better. Yirmiyah was in chains, taken into the galut, and now he's suddenly being freed by the chief butcher of the Babylonian army. The majority of Am Yisrael was forced out of the land, and we said a small amount of Jews were allowed to stay in Eretz Yisrael. Not only that, but they were now even allowed a Jewish leader to lead them. The Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel, appointed Gedalyah as the leader of these few Jews that were allowed to remain in Eretz Yisrael. So after all of the death and the destruction that had taken place during the years of the Churban, it seemed like good things were going to happen, at least for those handful of Jews who were still in Eretz Yisrael. So Gedalyah begins to organize those few people, the few families that stayed there, and he vows to protect them, and he even organizes them economically. Gedalyah ben Achikam became a beacon of hope, ladies. And because his influence expanded, you suddenly had Jewish refugees in foreign lands who heard the good news that we now had a Jewish leader back in Eretz Yisrael, and that those few who remained in Eretz Yisrael were allowed to remain there. And when they heard this, they started to come home. They started to come back home. You look at this scene, and it looks like Malchut Yehuda, the kingdom of Yehuda, is being given a second chance over here. And the pasuk in Sefer Yirmiyah tells us, "Veyashuvu chol haYehudim mikol hamekomot asher nidchu sham." All the Jews started returning from all the places that they were driven out to. Could you picture this scene, ladies? It feels like kibbutz galuyot. It feels like the gathering of the exiles. Jews were slowly starting to return to the land from the four corners of the globe, and you have to feel like there can't possibly be a turnaround greater than that. Now, one of the officers who joined Gedalyah was Yochanan ben Kareach. He was actually one of the former captains of the Judean army. Yochanan comes to Gedalyah in a public setting, and he warns him that the king of Ammon, whose name was Baalis, he's sending an assassin named Ishmael ben Netanyah to kill him. Gedalyah hears this, and he refuses to believe that Ishmael, a fellow Jew, would be working for a foreign agent against his own brothers. It's hard for us to believe that also. But Yochanan was very persistent, and he didn't let go. So he warned Gedalyah a second time, but this time he warned him in secrecy, privately. Why did it have to be in secret? Yochanan was trying to tell Gedalyah the following. He was saying, Gedalyah, I know that this display of unity that you are trying to demonstrate, this show of strength on your part, I know it's for the sake of the people. But just let me take care of the situation over here. I'm going to go without anybody knowing, and I'll kill Ishmael before he kills you. Nobody has to know about it. He tells him, Lama yakeka nefesh? Why should we allow Ishmael to kill you? You know what would happen if he succeeds and kills you? V'nafotzu kol Yehuda hanikbatzim elecha. All those people who gathered here in Yehuda will once again be scattered and lost. Ve'avda she'erit Yehuda. And whatever remnant is left of Yehuda, it's going to be lost. Everything you're trying to build is going to be shattered, and it's going to be destroyed. When we were in high school reading reading the Sefer Yirmiyah, we lost sight of how Gedalyah ben Achikam was warned. And why was this warning a part of the story? Is the Navi telling us that Gedalyah was unfortunately naive. I mean, think about it. If this was a mystery novel, we'd be reading the lines and we'd literally be commenting out loud and saying, Gedalyah, listen to Yochanan and get out of there as soon as you can. Run away. Let Yochanan take care of Ishmael for you. But unfortunately, Gedalyah once again refuses to believe Yochanan's words. And then it came to pass in the 7th month, which we know is Tishrei. The Pasuk tells us, Ba Ishmael ben Netanyah ben Elishama. Ishmael came, and the Pasuk starts to give us a window into this man's motive. The Pasuk tells us, Mizera hamelucha verabe hamelech. Ishmael was of royal descent. He came from the family of the kings of Yehudah, and he was an advisor to the previous king who was exiled by the Babylonians. Ve'asara anashim ito. Ishmael brings with him 10 men, and he comes to Gedalyah's place in Mitzpah, and it says, Vayochlu sham lechem yachdav, and they all sit down together with Gedalyah to have a meal. Ladies, as far as Gedalyah is concerned, the fact that Ishmael and his 10 men are sitting down with him and eating at the same table, it's a great victory. After all, Ishmael is a member of the former king's family, and his support could be very useful in reestablishing a government in Yehudah. But then, as they're all eating together, and the picture seems so peaceful and so tranquil, the Pasuk tells us, Vayakam Ishmael ben Netanyah ve'aseret anashim asher hayu ito. Ishmael and his 10 men who were with him rise up. Vayaku et Gedalyah ben Achikam ben Shaphan b'cherev vayamet oto. They all get up and they kill Gedalyah with their swords. And then the Pasuk reminds us, they killed Gedalyah, the one who was appointed by the king of Babylonia to govern over Eretz Israel. They killed the man who was considered the Jewish people's final hope for political autonomy and a return to the land. But unfortunately, Ishmael and his men crushed the hopes and the dreams of the people. Sadly, the killing didn't stop with Gedalyah ben Achikam. Ishmael and his men killed many more people who were gathered there in Eretz Israel, Jews and non-Jews alike. It was a bloodbath that left the Jewish people without a leader, without hope. How sad is this? The following morning, word of this massacre hadn't yet gotten out. And the Pasuk tells us, Vayavo anashim mishchem, mishilo, umishomron, shmonim ish. 80 Jewish people, 80 Jewish men arrive from Shechem, from Shiloh, and the Shomron. Megulache zakan, ukru'ei vgadim, umitgodedim. These men, they shaved off their beards. They were wearing torn clothing, and they cut themselves over the mourning for the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. Bear in mind that these 80 people here have no clue as to what happened with Gedalyah. They are crying over the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. And the Pasuk tells us, Vayetze Ishmael ben Netanyah likratam min ha-mitzpah. Ishmael goes out from Mitzpah to greet them. Holech haloch uvoche. Ishmael is crying as he walks towards them. He's faking his tears. He greets them and he says, Bo el Gedalyah ben Achikam. Let me take you to Gedalyah. Ishmael was setting a trap for these poor people, these poor Jewish refugees. Vayehi kevoam el toch ha'ir. And when these people finally reached the inner city, Vayishchatem Ishmael ben Netanyah. Ishmael and his men slaughtered these refugees also, and they throw them into a pit. Ladies, we read this, we hear about this, and tears well up in our eyes. We can't believe the inner conflict that was taking place during that time of the first destruction. Can't believe that this is what brothers are doing to their own brothers. And we have to ask, why did Ishmael do this? Did he want to wipe out all the people who may have been loyal to Gedalyah? Did he kill these innocent people because he didn't want his terrible crime from the day before to be discovered? Was this murderous rampage just an attempt to cover up his tracks? But either way, the tragedy just continued. After all this chaos took place, whoever was left who wasn't killed from Ishmael's murderous spree, they all eventually made their way down to Egypt. And for the first time since the days of Yehoshua, the continuous presence of Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael came to an end. There was not a Jew in Eretz Yisrael. This is a terrible and tragic story, ladies. What's the lesson we're supposed to learn from this? And why does this story merit its own fast day? Because it almost feels like Tisha B'Av all over again, just that it's the day after Rosh Hashanah. But there must be something about this story of Gedalyah ben Achikam that's a little different. There has to be something that's relevant to us years later, that Chachamim made this tragedy worth commemorating the day after Rosh Hashanah. Let's go back to the end of our story for a moment. After Ishmael massacres these innocent people, he takes their bodies and throws them into a pit. Ladies, does this sound familiar to you? Where else have we seen this idea in the Torah HaKadosha? You know where? In the story of Yosef. In the story of Yosef, Yosef rises to power under a foreign king, Paro, just like Gedalyah rose to power under a foreign king, Nebuchadnezzar. And what did Yosef do with his power? He used his influence in order to take care of his brothers, in order to help them, just like Gedalyah. But the story of Yosef HaTzadik alav Shalom began when his brothers were jealous of him and threw him into a pit and pretty much left him there to die. And ultimately, the mistreatment of Yosef sets the entire family of Yaakov Avinu alav Shalom on a path that ultimately ends in exile in Egypt. So the story of Gedalyah ben Achikam sounds very similar to the story of Mechirat Yosef. Are these similarities coincidental? Nothing in our Torah is ever coincidental. So let's review our story. Nebuzaradan, the chief military officer, releases Yirmiyah HaNavi from captivity and sends him back to Gedalyah in Eretz Yisrael. The chief military officer's title was Rav Tabachim, the master butcher. It's a strange name, and as we mentioned earlier, it could be a reference to his military skills, but it could also be hinting to us, because Where's the only other story where we have a Sar HaTabachim? Chachamim tell us that Potiphar, who Yosef was first sold to, he was the Sar HaTabachim, the minister of butchers for Paro. That's interesting. But there's more. There's more similarities. Nebuzaradan tells Yirmiyah that he could go back to Eretz Yisrael and return to Gedalyah. And what are the words he uses? Asher hifkid melech Bavel be'arei Yehuda. Yirmiyah is told that the king of Bavel appointed Gedalyah in all the cities of Yehuda. The word hifkid, which means to appoint or to entrust, is mentioned quite a number of times in the story of Yosef HaTzadik. It's first used when Potiphar appoints Yosef head over his entire household. And then again when Yosef is thrown into jail after the whole incident with Potiphar's wife. He's once again appointed. It says Vayifkod. He's appointed to take charge of his fellow prisoners. Then when Yosef first appears before Paro, he advises Paro to appoint overseers throughout the land. It says Vayifkod Pekdim ala Haaretz. So we see that word shows up a couple of times in the story of Yosef, just like it did in the story of Gedalyah. Let's go back to the story of Gedalyah. Ishmael and his crew are described as 10 men who sit down to break bread. If you remember, in the story of Yosef, the 10 brothers, not including Benjamin, they all sat down to break bread before getting ready to perform the most tragic act of selling their brother while he cried from the pit that they threw him in. And what does the Pasuk tell us that they did right before they sold Yosef into slavery? It says, Vayeshvu le'echol lechem. The 10 brothers sat down to eat bread. It's another similarity. And think of the way that Gedalyah was murdered. It was through treachery, through deceit, through slyness. They trapped Gedalyah, and then they deceived the refugees that came to join him the next day. Those refugees were coming from Shechem. Shechem is where Mechirat Yosef took place. It's where the selling of Yosef took place. That's where Yaakov Avinu sent Yosef in order to look after his brothers. That's another similarity. Also, Ishmael drew in those poor refugees in a sneaky way. Those refugees who were mourning, tearing their clothes and crying, Ishmael pretended he was on their side. Holech haloch uvoche. Ishmael goes out to greet them with tears and crying, but it's a fake crying. And in the story of Yosef, the brothers also engaged in a kind of deception that caused others to tear their clothes and to mourn. How? Well, if you remember, when the brothers brought Yosef's bloody coat to their father Yaakov, as soon as Yaakov saw the bloody tunic, he tore his clothes and he mourned over Yosef for many years. Vayefk oto aviv. Yaakov cried over the loss of Yosef. And we assume that the brothers also had to shed some fake tears in order to keep up the entire charade. And if we're already, by the way, discussing the bloody coat, remember how it got bloody in the first place? The Pasuk says, Vayishchetu se'ir izim. The brothers slaughtered a goat and they took its blood and they dipped the coat in the blood in order to deceive their father. Interestingly, the same word is used to describe what Ishmael did to those refugees from Shechem. What does it say? Vayishchatem. He slaughtered them. Many similarities. But here's the clincher, ladies. Ishmael threw his victims el toch habor. He threw them into the pit. Now that sounds like it was taken straight out of the story of Yosef, where it tells us that the brothers grabbed Yosef. Vayashlichu oto habora. They threw him into the pit. They cast him into the pit. Ladies, it's almost as if the psukim in Yirmiyah HaNavi are calling out to us and saying, this is just like the story of Yosef. It's happening all over again. And we have to ask the obvious question. Why? Why all these parallels here? What does it mean? When you hear the story of the assassination of Gedalyah ben Achikam, you can't help but feel badly for him. He's the good guy. And Ishmael and his disgraceful pack of 10 men are the bad guys. It seems like another story of Tzaddik Veralo. So what lesson are we supposed to learn from Tzom Gedalyah? What do we learn? Don't murder? Is that all? It's got to be deeper than that. So we have to ask, who was Ishmael? What motivated him? Well, since we went back to the story of Yosef HaTzadik and Sefer Bereshit, and we made some very interesting comparisons, let's go back even further to the first Ishmael, the son of Avraham Avinu, through his wife, through his maidservant, Hagar. You see, even though Ishmael was Avraham's firstborn, it was Yitzchak, not Ishmael, who was chosen to carry on Avraham's legacy and be the builder of Am Yisrael. So despite the fact that Ishmael was the older one, he was given a second place status in the family. Interestingly, generations later, we have another Ishmael who comes from a royal family and served under the king of Yehuda. He's watching as someone else from his family, from his nation, is now sitting on the throne, and he cannot handle it. He doesn't see Gedalyah as his brother anymore. He suddenly sees him as the enemy. Gedalyah becomes the enemy that he has to eliminate. And guess what? This is not the only story of sibling conflict where Ishmael shows up. Believe it or not, Ishmael also makes a surprise appearance in the story of Yosef and his brothers. Because when Yosef was sitting in that pit, you know what the brothers decided to do with him? They said, let's sell him to the Ishmaelim, to the descendants of Ishmael, to the first rejected brother in our family. It's as if the Shvatim, it's as if Yosef's brothers identified with Ishmael, the rejected son, and then they turned that resentment into vengeance. That was the catalyst for Mechirat Yosef. It was about brothers fighting brothers. It was about brothers betraying brothers. And at the core, the tragic story of Gedalyah ben Achikam is a replay of that same situation. Ladies, Gedalyah was that glimmer of hope, the light at the end of a very dark tunnel. But what brought that light crumbling to the ground was brothers stabbing brothers in the back. We don't know exactly why. Maybe Ishmael was jealous of Gedalyah because he wanted to be the one in charge. Maybe he was self-righteously angry that Gedalyah was appointed by the king of Babylonia and he wasn't. Maybe Ishmael thought that Gedalyah was treasonous and that he Bechlal cooperated with Nebuchadnezzar, with the enemy of Am Yisrael. But either way, Gedalyah And Ishmael's political agendas were completely different. And for Ishmael, the ends justified the means. Whatever he felt he had to do in order to make his point get across, he did. Even if it meant killing his own brothers. But think about Gedalyah for a moment. Why are we told that he was warned and that he ignored the warnings? Is the Navi trying to tell us that Gedalyah was very naive? No. When Gedalyah is told that there's a Jewish brother from a royal family who's planning to betray his fellow brothers and kill him, he refuses to believe it. In Gedalyah's world, brothers are supposed to lift up one another, not tear them down. But the pasuk after that tells us that the second warning that Gedalyah received, what was told to him? It was told to him baseter. It was told to him in secret. Yochanan tells him, Lama yakeka nefesh. Why should we let Ishmael kill you? These words are also found in the story of Yosef. These are the words that Reuven used to plead with his brothers, the Dishav Rachamim and Yosef. He says to them, Lo nakenu nafesh. Let's not be murderers over here. So what's going on? Why are we told about this warning that Gedalyah received twice, and that the second time he received it, it was in secret? I think, ladies, that the pasuk is telling us that Gedalyah could have, if he wanted to, he could have stooped to Ishmael's level. He could have used the tactics of Yosef's brothers, of the Shevatim. He also could have let the ends justify the means. But Gedalyah didn't want any part of this story. Even in secret, even if nobody knows, he wasn't willing to have the blood of one of his brothers shed, even if nobody knows about it. You know what we learned from all of this, ladies? There are many times where we hold of our self-righteous political opinions, where we hold of our personal opinions or religious views. There are times we think we're so right that we allow the ends to justify the means. And even though most of us don't think about assassinating our opposition because that's a little too extreme, but how many of us lose sight of the humanity, of the brotherhood that's supposed to hold our people together, to hold this nation together? Think about how we relate to people who we don't agree with politically, religiously. How easily do we let our self-righteousness blind us? How easily do we dismiss them and we say, it's people like you who are destroying our nation? We do that all the time. I think you'll all agree that there's been enough sinat chinam in our history to last us a lifetime. We have enough stories of brothers turning on brothers. Sometimes we divide ourselves into little camps or various sects, thinking that we're the only ones who are right, when the real goal is to try to rebuild our nation. That's what Gedalyah was trying to do. The real objective is to have the zechut to one day return to Eretz Yisrael and live united with the Bet HaMikdash rebuilt, and as a Kadosh Baruch Hu being the sovereign king of the entire world. That's what we davened for on Rosh Hashanah. And that's what Gedalyah was trying to do way back then. But somehow that goal gets overlooked because we're so busy with our own views, with our own perspectives of life, and very many times that perspective could be very skewed. That's what happened between Yosef and his brothers all those years ago. That's what happened here in the case of Gedalyah and Ishmael. And it still happens with us today. The story of Gedalyah ben Achikam carries with it such an important message, specifically during this time of the year. You see, on Rosh Hashanah, we spent 2 full days focused on Hashem, who is Malkenu. He's our king. And He's also Avinu. He's our father. But what we have to remember is that if we have an Abba, if we have a father, we also have brothers and sisters. And if we try to reconnect to our father on Rosh Hashanah, we have to try to reconnect with our siblings during Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, which leads up to Yom Kippurim. Maybe these 10 days are significant because of the 10 brothers who sold Yosef, and the 10 men together with Ishmael who killed their fellow brothers. Maybe this is the time to examine ourselves and to search for the humanity that exists in our brothers and sisters, and that humanity that exists in us. Maybe this is the time where we have to try to find a way to forgive them. Forgive them through understanding, and if possible, to try to find some common ground of communication. This is the time, I'll say it again, where if it's possible and if it's healthy for you, you have to try to cross that great divide and connect with those people you're conflicted about. Try to see what you could accomplish together. Again, if it's possible and if it's healthy for you. Because ultimately, ladies, making peace with our brothers and sisters, even if it means in our own hearts, means that we're looking at ourselves and at them as part of a larger family. And at the end of the day, all of Am Yisrael are Achim. Achenu kol bet Yisrael. We're all brothers. This is one of the lessons of the story of Gedalyah and why we fasted today, ladies. It's this kind of tragic story, the details and its ending, that we were mourning over. So my bracha to all of you is that this, B'ezrat Hashem, this coming year should bring with it understanding, inner peace, a refocusing of priorities, a good year with Hatzlacha, Ahava, Siyata Dishmaya, and I hope, B'ezrat Hashem, the gift of the final Geula. Amen Ken, Yehi Ratzon.
שלעולם לא אפול, לא אמעט, שיותר לא אשאר